When I reach 1000 subscribers I will be giving away a $25 Amazon gift card away. To enter, like, subscribe and leave a comment below. Posted by who/beware_the_syllogism. Don't want to pay me $100 for 3 hours of graphic design. I'm going to follow your instructions and know how this is going to end. While I was in school I got a call from a guy, let's call him M, in advertising, who wanted me to set up a basic presentation. M was going to be doing a presentation about some advertising schemes he was trying to shill. Fancied himself a comedian, a leader in the advertising industry in the city I live in. Basically pictures himself as a powerful seer/entrepreneur/visionary. Looking back, this guy basically preyed on graphic designers and anyone else in his path. This presentation was really about trying to get people to buy into his, no doubt, failing advertising firm, or a way to extract free work from freelancers. Not a big deal, except I grew up in a super religious family, was not allowed to say no to authority ever. Despite having a lot of common sense and logic, this was stamped out very early on. I'm learning the power of no is something I'm only coming to embrace without guilt, shame. Jesus says no, or God will strike you down with righteous smiting if you don't do what we say. Real fire and brimstone stuff. I've spent way too much money on therapy. Anyway, M wants me to make a presentation he's going to give in front of the advertising industry. It's a bunch of jokes that I would expect to hear from some drunk at a college bar that amount to nice cans. Let's fuck. It's stupid, and in an industry that prides itself on wordsmithery this isn't going to work at all. The city we live in is very LGBTQ, etc. friendly, and the industry has a lot of people who identify as such. This is definitely not gonna work. I don't want my name on it. M is such a cheapskate that he tells me to use the very least expensive clip art he selected. Thumbnails if you can get away with it. I'm thinking 72 dpi is gonna look like shit on that giant screen. I've had my work featured up on the same screen, and you bet your ass I was using the most DPI I could get away with. He gives me the password to his clip art account. Cool. He tells me, when I'm almost ready to deliver, that he can't afford to pay me. Can we meet up? And working something out. Meeting place is a fairly upscale steakhouse. I tell him 72 DPI isn't going to cut it. Can we go higher? And he waves his hand dismissively and says no, it will be fine. He pays for the meal. This wasn't part of the deal. I want $100, and if you've got money to drop on dinner I'd rather save myself the time driving here, eating. Just trim the cash and get out of my life. He hands me a pile of vouchers, expired, surprise, and runs off, probably to his tax person, to write off dinner as a business expense. Anyway, I use the lowest DPI clip art possible. It looks like shit on my screen. It's going to look like absolute shit on a 35+ foot screen. This will be great. He's refusing to spend $50 on clip art. He's that cheap. I threw in some vector assets to make it look even worse. I send it to him. He must be on his laptop, a real tiny one, because he says it looks great. This is going to be a great presentation, and tries to invite me to the event. Like I said, I don't want my name on it. He calls me up a week later, furious. My presentation looked like shit. No one would look or talk to me after. Why did you use such low-res assets? This is your fault. I calmly tell him I did exactly as he asked me to. What was the problem? He's super pissed and barely making any sense. I thank him for his time and the coupons, not bringing up that they were expired. Not sure what happened to him. His Twitter hasn't been active since. All of his websites are down. He doesn't even show up on LinkedIn. Oh well. TLDR, client orders me to cheap out on assets for a presentation at an advertising event. Tanks his entire empire because he's too cheap to spend less than $200 on a presentation. Is mad at me for complying with spending as little money as possible. Posted by who/soldregan with flow. Tell me what you said. Okay, so this story is less malicious compliance and more uncomfortable / teaching stupid sister or lesson compliance. Background. First, myself. I'm an extremely blunt and honest person. I won't go out of my way to point out other people's shortcomings or anything. Gods know I have more than enough of those myself. but I don't do questions with set answers. In other words, if you ask, does my ass look big in this? I will give you a yes/no answer based on what I actually think, not what I think you are looking for. If you ask my opinion, I will give it to you. Unbelievable. What a dick, right? Some people in my life will say this because I'm technically on the spectrum. Mild Asperger syndrome, but personally, I don't fully buy it. I'm just a bit of a dick in that regard, Like I said, it's mild at best. Next up, a bit of family history. My mother and father broke up when I was around 4, and although I saw my dad on the weekends, I lived with my mother. Not a problem, since she's an awesome person. Before long, my mother found another partner whom she soon married. Trouble was, this guy was a grade A piece of shit. He was lazy AF, loud, obnoxious, a heavy drinker, physically and verbally abusive, and just an all-around 6'5", 22 street football hooligan bully. I never understood what she saw in him. To give you an idea of just how much of a disgusting bully this prick is, I had an accident several years ago that resulted in a spinal injury and paralysis. I won't go into the details, but less than a year after coming home from the hospital, this post decides I'm too inconvenient, now I'm in a wheelchair, and throws me out onto the street. Out of the wheelchair accessible house the gov paid for BTW. I lived for a while with my dad, not a wheelchair accessible house, before I found a place of my own. Thankfully, they did eventually divorce, but it still took 14 years for mum to wake up and smell the coffee. At the time of meeting my mother, the pose, however, already had another kid from another relationship. Actually, he had several, but only one that matters here. We'll call her SS for Stepsies. SS actually grew up to be a decent person, but no thanks to her parents. Her "father" is unworthy of the title human, much less father, and her mother, from what I can gather, wasn't much better. SS lived with us, me, mum, pose, and mum plus POS daughter little c/ls. SS lived with us because her mother was just never there for her. I heard stories about her spending the night in jail, not picking her up for contact hours, and a whole boatload of other things. Her dad was pose classic TM, while her mum was pos like TM. In the interest of fairness and science, I will acknowledge I'm only getting one side of the story, but I saw enough with my own eyes during our childhood to not have a high opinion of her. My mum was more of a mother to SS than pos light ever was. The story. So, a few weeks ago SS and I decide to go out for a meal. Her dad/pose and my mother might be divorced now, and we might both be living on our own, but we still keep in contact. Halfway through the meal, the subject turns to LS and mum. LS had potential, but unfortunately, she also has her father's temper, foul mouth, and bully genes. She and mum have been arguing with increasing intensity for years now, and a couple of months ago it finally came to boiling point. LS hit her. Yeah, that was the final straw. Parents should never lay a hand on their kids, sure, but the same goes for kid-sitting parents. You just don't do it. That sent mum over the edge and she kicked her out. LS is 18 for reference. As SS and I are talking, she tells me that LS is now living with POSL. I was surprised. The two don't have any blood relation, and aren't even friends as far as I know. But whatevs. Not my business. I was already agitated from discussing how poorly LS had been treating mum, so I guess that contributed to what I said next. Without thinking, my mouth muttered the words, "OP, that should work fine. They are both horrible people." Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but it was one of those things that happen sometimes where things just slip out. I muttered it through, and SS didn't hear me properly. At first, I was relieved, but then she kept prodding me for what I said. SS, what did you say? OP, you don't want to know. SS, no, come on. What did you say? OP, no, really, you don't want to know. This goes back and forth for a bit, before I guess the Asperger S/brutal honesty part of me kicked in. With a serious deadpan expression I say, OP, fine. You asked for it. I said that should work fine, since they are both such horrible people. For the record, I meant it. I just didn't want to say it out loud. SS then acts all offended, saying I have no right, and that it was dad who took me away from her, etc. Yawn. As far as I'm concerned, The only parental figure SS had in her life was my mum. She was certainly more of a mother to SS than POSL ever was. And besides, what I think of POS and POSL doesn't matter. It's just my opinion. And I don't even spread it around. It's not like I hold any power over SS and POSL seeing each other, nor would I ever try, or want to interfere with that. They are both grown women, and can do WTF they like. I immediately let the subject go, however, not pointing any of this out to her. I simply said, OP, well I did say back quote you don't want to know. I'll let her vent for a while, before she eventually calms down. By the end of the meal, she's fine. Who knows, maybe next time when someone tells her something like drop it, or you don't want to know, she'll actually listen. Consider it a life lesson from her big bro. Posted by u/medicated warrior 365. Rude customer wants to buy meat from our meat department. So this story happened probably a good 8 years ago, but it still sticks out in my mind and I have a good laugh about it. Our story starts with some background. I was working at a local supermarket in the meat department and had risen through the ranks to basically be in charge of running it. We were constantly short-staffed and it was always one person left to close the last 4 hours of the store being open. This meant dealing with the occasional customer and also the dishes in the back, machines being cleaned, stock being put in the walk-in, and other prep stuff. One machine in particular, a motorized meat tenderizer, had to be cleaned and soaked overnight, and as the thing is literally 2 spiral death razor blades, it took some effort to clean and generally had to soak for at least a half hour before you'd be able to rinse it off and soak it again. So it was common to have this machine. All other things were working until close except this machine. Disassembled about an hour before we closed. The rude customer is this lady who would always come in and insisted we tenderize her meat selection, and every time she would get the same answer of "we're sorry, but that particular machine is closed earlier due to it being harder to clean," and she would scoff and leave. There was probably 2 weeks of her doing this despite many attempts and offers of our direct line, so she could call ahead and we would have her order ready. No dice. Well, this day I was closing down the department and it was getting close to closing time. About 40 minutes left, and in walks the entitled lady, and she makes her way through the aisle and walks up to the meat counter. She again wants the same order. I try to explain again it's closed. She does her normal scoff and walks off, and I think that's the end of it. Nope. She comes back with the store manager. She was friends with her, and again I explain why I couldn't make her order. The manager tells me to just go wash it and get her order. The lady looks pleased, and I say okay, I'll get right on it, and into the back room I went. I started washing the blades on the rollers, and obviously it wasn't doing much since they hadn't been soaking long. I find a small enough brush that can get between the blades and scrap out the gunk. This whole cleaning process takes me well over 30 minutes, but at the same time, I'm watching through our one-way glass mirror and seeing the look of joy turn into anger as the women realized I wasn't kidding. She eventually got fed up and started to shop through the store, and when I got everything finished and set back up, she was in line at the front, get ready to pay and leave. I quickly turned the machine on and packaged her order up and almost ran up to her cart and said, "Here's your order." She said she didn't want it anymore, and I gladly told her that it was store policy, that you have to pay for your order if it gets processed even if you don't want it anymore, and dropped it in her cart and said, "Have a great day." The best part for me, and probably most malicious of all, was the fact that I still had all my other normal closing duties that would have been done, and because the store owner has the keys, she had to stay late and pay me overtime while I finished up. After that night they did not question me again. The rude lady never came back to my knowledge, and yes, she had to buy the meat. I watched her check out and try to fight it, but no dice for her. Hope you enjoyed the tale from my college job, and if you're out there lady, I hope your meal was wonderful lol. Edit. So the order was cube steak. Thank you Reddit for figuring out my very vague description lol. I also realize we could have done it by hand, and it was offered to her many times. She insisted it had to be put through the machine or they wouldn't come out right. When I reach 1,000 subscribers I will be giving away a $25 Amazon gift card away. To enter, like, subscribe and leave a comment below.